good morning. Did everybody watch the Fox News debate last night? Woo! Fox News was pretty good, isn't it? Well, that's where I work. How many of you watch Fox News? Okay, you'll get this. I'm the brunette. And for the last 6 years, I've been on Fox News on a regular and daily basis talking about and analyzing the national security issues of our day. Before that, I had a long career in government, starting when I was 18, working for Henry Kissinger in the White House Situation Room. I worked for Nixon, I worked for Ford, I went to graduate school, and then I worked for President Reagan. At the Pentagon, I was one of the highest ranking women. I got the highest National Pentagon Award for the civilian service. And then in 1985, I did the absolute impossible, nobody would ever do it again, I walked away. I fell in love, I got married, my husband's right there, I moved to New York, we raised 5 kids. So for the next 15 years, I wasn't from Washington. I was more concerned with who got elected class mother than who we were electing to Congress. Actually, I got elected class mother twice. But I made Christmas ornaments, we did the bake sale, we had the Mothers Association, so that's where my life was for 15 years. And then on September 11th, 2001, I dropped my two youngest kids off at school and I went to Lower Manhattan. And I saw the Twin Towers be hit by 2 planes. And that changed my life, changed all of our lives. I immediately started writing a memorandum to my former colleague Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State, to talk about how should we fight radical Islam and how do you bring the American people along with the fight. I was sort of minding my own business, doing a few speeches here and there until my teenage daughter, any of you have teenage daughters? All right, well, she looked at me and said, "Mom, when are you gonna go to work? When are you gonna get out of the house and stop having lunch with your girlfriends?" So she inspired me to go back to work, and I did. So after 15 years as a stay-at-home mom, I became a national security analyst. Well, long story short, ran for the Senate in 2006, lost in New York, lost to Hillary, and then started working at Fox News. So what I have observed in all of those years, and the reason I tell you this, well, first so that you'll think I'm really smart, but secondly, so that you'll understand where I'm coming from, I want to do a little poll. And raise your hands, how many of you think the economy is not where it should be, that we haven't recovered economically? Keep your hands up. How many of you think that we are getting kicked around all over the world by the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese, you name it, even the North Koreans? Okay, how many of you think that we have lost our way as a nation, that the values that we thought made America great are no longer important to most people? They are to us, but not to most people. And how many of you think that the Washington cartel doesn't listen to us anymore? Okay, everybody, right? Even the waiter in the back of the room, his hand is up. And you're right. If I had taken that poll in 1980, you would have had the same results. In 1980, the economy was flatlined. We even had to make up a new word for it. It was called stagflation. We were certainly getting kicked around all over the world. The American diplomats were held hostage in Iran, and we couldn't manage to rescue them, and we couldn't figure out how to get them out of there. And we had really lost our way as a nation. In fact, we had a president, Jimmy Carter, who gave a speech in the Oval Office, a pathetic speech about the malaise of the American people, that we consumed too much, that we were polluting the planet, and that it was all our fault. Okay, well, that's the same kind. Does that all sound familiar to you? Isn't that what you're hearing now? It's all our fault. We're no longer leading from the front, we're leading from behind, and the economy is flatlined. So it's the same debate and it's the same conversation. Let me tell you what Reagan did about that in 1980, because I think it offers us a lot of examples to how you deal with it today. In 1980, Ronald Reagan came to CPAC. He was 10 points behind. He was running for president. It was a primary. He was 10 points behind. The media said he's not smart enough to be president. The Republican establishment said he's a warmonger. He's going to get us in trouble. The Democrats said he's going to crash the economy. Wait, he wasn't smart enough. He didn't know enough about foreign policy. He was going to crash the economy. He was going to divide us. Well, Ronald Reagan came to CPAC, he made his case, and the Republican Party believed him and not the establishment. Then he went to the Nation, and he made the same case. Again, everybody criticized him. You go inside the Beltway, they thought Ronald Reagan was going to be the Antichrist if he came to Washington, if they believed. But Ronald Reagan won because the American people heard him, and he changed the world. He did what he said he was going to do. He fixed the economy. He cut taxes, he cut government regulations, he made it possible for small industries to start, small businesses, and by taking the handcuffs off of American ingenuity, he allowed the tech revolution to begin and flourish, and that is what has kept America strong and powerful and at the head of the world economy for a generation. He also said peace through strength. He built up the American defenses, and he said, we're not going to just coexist with the Soviet Union. We're going to beat them, but we're not going to go to war with them. We're just going to beat them a lot of other ways. We're going to have a strong defense so nobody picks a fight with us, but we're going to beat them economically. We're going to beat them, use all the tools in our toolbox, the diplomacy, economics, moral leadership. We're going to repair our relations with our allies. He did all of that and launched the longest period of peace in the post-war period and probably in world history. The third thing he did, though, was he restored our faith in ourselves. And because he believed in us, we believed in us too. And because we believed in ourselves, the world believed in us. And the world looked to that shining city on the hill. So as you look at today and tomorrow, you're going to meet all the people running for president. You're going to meet the establishment, the non-establishment. They're all going to tell you how great they are. You make that decision. I can't tell you who to vote for. I mean, I could, but I won't. But I can't do that. You have to do that because you're the people. But when you decide, go out and do something about it. I can tell you, though, that whoever you choose, here's what they have to do. First, do what Reagan did. Take a page out of his rule book. First, fix the economy. Cut corporate tax rate. Cut individual taxes. Streamline regulations. Let's frack, baby, frack. Let all of the ingenuity that's in the United States come forward. We have about a dozen new technologies just waiting to be developed. If you cut corporate tax rates, $2 trillion comes flowing back to the United States as a seed capital to make those. So fix the economy first, Mr. President, whoever you are. The second thing, though, is restore America's defenses and restore who we are as a nation. This leading from behind stuff has not worked. President Obama, and I think he probably is well-intentioned, President Obama came into office, here's the mindset. America has not been a force for good in the world. We pollute the planet, we cause wars, starting to sound familiar. And he said, I'm going to take America back a notch. And America's going to come back a notch, and then everybody's going to come forward in a rules-based global international order. And it's going to be kumbaya, chocolates, roses, and fairy tales. Well, what's happened as we've stepped back is we've seen the chaos in the world. We've seen the Russians trying to take over Eastern Europe. We've seen the Chinese trying to grab the South China Sea as an internal Chinese lake. And we've seen absolute fire and catastrophe throughout the Middle East that goes from North Africa to the Levant to the peninsula of Saudi Arabia all the way over to Afghanistan. That's the world he's bequeathing to the rest of us. But the thing that President Reagan thought was the most important thing that he did, and I think one of the worst things that President Obama has done, is he's divided us more than we've ever been divided before. And whether you like this candidate or that candidate, at the end of the day, you got to come together. Because our threats are real. The threat of radical Islam, we've tried for 15 years to get rid of it, and we haven't figured it out. We had a big land war in the Middle East, and that didn't work. President Obama's totally ignored the Middle East. Well, that hasn't worked either. But we have new weapons at our disposal that even Ronald Reagan didn't have. Let me show you what they are. See this? Everybody has one, right? That didn't exist 8 years ago. That's an iPhone. And if everybody in the Middle East has an iPhone, what did they do? They caused the Arab Spring. They toppled governments right and left. What do our enemies have in common? China, or adversaries, China, Russia, North Korea. Who was that on the phone? That must be the Chinese foreign minister. The Chinese...
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
That's Siri. Be quiet. What these countries have in common with each other is that they don't let their people do this. We could take down the cyber walls of all of our adversaries, the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Iranians, and we would let them have their own revolutions. It's not a weapon we should use lightly, but it's a weapon at our disposal. The other weapon we have is this. It seems to be shrinking, but this weapon that we have, we didn't have 10 years ago, and that this is our domination of the world currency. We own the reserve currency of the world, and the banking system of the world runs on dollars. It's an economic weapon that we had failed to use adequately. Again, we don't use it lightly, but it is at our disposal, and we can use it against our adversaries. We need to build up our military, and most important, we need to remember our veterans. How many of you know a veteran, or have parents who were veterans, or grandparents who were veterans? When I worked for Ronald Reagan, one of the things he did was to heal the soul of America. And on Memorial Day, 1983, he stood at Arlington Memorial Cemetery, and he waited for the caisson, the parade that was coming from the Capitol building all the way across the Memorial Bridge to Arlington Cemetery. The American military had lined that entire parade route, and what Ronald Reagan accepted were the remains of the unidentified soldier from Vietnam. 1983, it was almost 10 years after the Vietnam War, and none of our leaders were willing to talk about that war. And Reagan said, I'm accepting this, and I am putting these remains in the tomb of the unknown soldier. I was there at Arlington that day, and I'm selfishly going to admit to you that I was there because I was with my boss, Cap Weinberger, Secretary of Defense, and I was sort of hoping to hear Ronald Reagan using the words I had written. And then I looked around where I was standing, and I saw veterans. They were in wheelchairs, they were in camouflage, they had dirty old ponytails, they had their medals pinned to their t-shirts, and they were crying because no president had acknowledged their sacrifice. And we had betrayed them and we had denied them, and that was a stain on the soul of America. And Ronald Reagan cleaned that stain. So, Ronald Reagan came here and said, our time is now. So I have one last question. How many of you were born after 1980? Old folks, don't even bother. Young folks, I was part of the revolution that Reagan launched. And Reagan and us, I was a foot soldier, we changed the world. We changed our country, we changed our party, we changed the country, and ultimately the world. It's your time now. And you have a choice. You can just sit around, watch it on Fox News, and go about your business. Or you can become involved. You can give your time, you can give your efforts, and you can go out and change the party, you can change the country, you can change the world. So your time is now. Go out and do it.